It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. More than 150 people killed in Southeast Asia after a powerful earthquake struck, with Myanmar's military junta appealing for urgent international help.
Prime Minister, why were there no warning? Why were there no warning?
In Bangkok, a rescue operation underway and dozens of workers trapped after tremors left destruction in their wake.
USA! 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 USA!
Also tonight, the US Vice President flies into Greenland as Vladimir Putin insists he's ready to protect Russia's interests in the Arctic. Greeted by well-wishers, the King is seen in public for the first time since he was treated in hospital. Plus...
Keep walking! Stop! Turn around!
The criminology student who hated women, sentenced to more than 39 years behind bars for murdering a stranger. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Good evening. A disaster on top of a disaster. That's how one senior aid worker described the humanitarian emergency in Myanmar. Today, the ruling military junta took the extraordinary step of appealing for international assistance after a powerful earthquake killed at least 144 people. The 7.7 magnitude quake was felt across Southeast and Central Asia. Myanmar and Thailand bore the brunt of its impact. The epicentre was near Myanmar's second largest city, Mandalay. Experts warn tens of thousands may have been killed there and in surrounding villages. Several buildings collapsed in Bangkok, where rescuers are trying to find workers trapped under the rubble. And the earthquake was so powerful and so close to the surface that tremors travelled hundreds of miles to Laos, Vietnam and Bangladesh. Our Asia correspondent, Cordelia Lynch, reports from Bangkok.
Bangkok, a city where lives are lived in the sky, crumbling. A building collapsing in seconds. Tremors from the epicentre of an earthquake 600 miles away in Myanmar. High-rise pools overflowed. A skyline of lofty hotels, apartments and offices looking suddenly very vulnerable. It was a surreal moment that came without warning.
I just started walking calmly at first, but then the building started really moving and yeah, a lot of screaming, a lot of panic, people running the wrong way down the escalators.
I went on the street and I looked up and a building equivalent to this one here was actually, you could see it next, compared to the next one, it was actually moving. It was swaying and all the water was coming from the top of the, yeah, and that's when it got me, you know.
In the city's busy shopping malls, a rush to escape and complete confusion. This government building was instantly destroyed. A structure about to be completed, reduced to rubble, with construction workers caught inside.
I just heard a loud noise crumble, almost like it sounded like thunder, and then I just saw smoke flying out, and it looked like 9/11 to me.
This is going to be an incredibly challenging rescue operation, a huge mound of rubble to contend with, lots of dust and now fading light. When the earthquake hit, dozens of construction workers were immediately trapped inside, hit by an earthquake no one was warned about.
On the ground, the hurried race to rescue. Teams were told to search for 90 people still missing, but their task is enormous and their work very delicate.
This is so very difficult. The building collapsed into layers, and it takes time and the utmost care to ensure that we don't injure any survivors caught beneath.
Well, here you can see the scale of the problem up close, just how much rubble they have to clear, and they're using heavy machinery to do it, bulldozers, being brought in the hope they can move it and try and bring some of those people trapped inside out.
What is hard to understand is why there was no warning before it hit, in a nation that 20 years ago suffered a devastating tsunami. The Thai Prime Minister was quick to visit the scene.
Prime Minister, why were there no warnings? Why were there no warnings?
She will face many more questions in the days ahead, but it's the hours ahead here that will be critical. It is, though, in neighbouring Myanmar where the devastation will be the greatest. The death toll is sure to rise. It's feared hundreds are dead. Here, monks in Mandalay watch on in horror, a monastery crumbling in front of them. At Mandalay University, more devastation, just as students were studying for their exams. This is a shell-shocked country, and one already ravaged by civil war. Getting aid in will be fraught and complicated. But the ruling military junta has declared a state of emergency, something it rarely does, suggesting there are fears of a high death toll. The people of Myanmar are used to fleeing violence. Here they're fleeing a natural disaster, in emergency mode and in need. So much so, those in charge are asking for help. Cordelia Lynch, Sky News, Bangkok, Thailand.
Well, for decades, Myanmar has been poor and underdeveloped. 20 million people were in need of aid even before the earthquake struck. Its shallow depth and the proximity to a heavily populated city made it both powerful and destructive. And that's why experts are fearing the worst. Here's our science and technology editor, Tom Clark.
Earthquakes are not uncommon in Myanmar, but the size of this one, 7.7 on the magnitude scale, makes it one of the largest in living memory for the millions of people impacted by its shockwaves. And that's what you can see here, a shake map showing the intensity of ground movement estimated by the US Geological Survey. This dark orange is violent shaking, likely resulting in high casualties and extensive building damage. It's a populated area too. The city of Mandalay has 1.2 million inhabitants, the capital Yangon, millions more. But images of extensive damage are coming in from across Myanmar and beyond, suggesting the force and destruction of this quake was widespread. All made worse, of course, by aftershocks. The worst, a magnitude 6.4 shock happening close by, just minutes after the main quake. Myanmar straddles the boundary between the vast Eurasian tectonic plate and the Indian plate that's moving slowly north, piling up stress on the rocks beneath, specifically along the 1,200-kilometre-long Segung fault line running right next to Mandalay and many other populous cities. The quake happened when the strain on that fault was suddenly released, and in geological terms at least, at a shallow depth, just 10 kilometres or 6 miles down. And the closer the surface, the greater the damage. Locally, that's in the form of intense shaking due to high-frequency vibrations, but lower-frequency shockwaves travel further, and tall buildings are most vulnerable to the slower movement they cause, perhaps explaining the collapse of tower blocks as far away as the one under construction in Bangkok. Previous earthquakes in Myanmar have caused damage like this to some of its oldest buildings, but this is the most powerful quake in this region since the 1940s, predating modern earthquake building codes. The fear is some older structures that survived previous quakes won't have endured this one. And of course, it's the buildings in which people live that are the greatest risk factor when it comes to earthquake casualties.
The US Vice President J.D. Vance may have received a frosty reception from residents in Greenland, but he was welcomed to the only US military base in the territory. And as the race for supremacy in the Arctic intensifies, he told soldiers only America could keep the island safe. So why is everyone clamouring for control there? Well, Russia, the US and Canada have some right to sovereignty over Arctic waters, with Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway and Sweden also part of the Arctic Council. China, classed as an observer, is also expanding its economic influence. Access to Arctic trade routes drastically cuts shipping times and fuel use, bringing huge economic benefits. The region also holds 13% of the world's undiscovered oil and 30% of undiscovered gas, along with considerable mineral wealth. Here's our US correspondent, David Blevins.
The Second Lady was booked to travel. Her husband joined her at short notice.
Vice President Vance, how's it feel?
But Greenland gave America's Vice President the cold shoulder.
How we doing? It's cold as here. Nobody told me.
A visit to troops stationed here was the only engagement for a second-in-command on manoeuvres.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome.
Sending a clear signal to the country that retains sovereignty of the world's largest island.
Our message to Denmark is very simple. You have not done a good job by the people of Greenland. You have underinvested in the people of Greenland, and you have underinvested in the security architecture of this incredible, beautiful landmass filled with incredible people. That has to change. What we think is going to happen is that the Greenlanders are going to choose through self-determination to become independent of Denmark, and then we're going to have conversations with the people of Greenland from there.
He said he didn't envisage military force being necessary, but President Trump hasn't ruled that out. And with a $2.5 trillion treasure trove of minerals under the snow, islanders are suspicious about America's motivation.
We've always looked at America like the nice big brother to help you out. And now it's like the big brother's bullying you.
I feel like US is forcing us to dance.
Yes.
Like, come, you're gonna dance with me now. It would be so much nicer if they were like, would you like to dance?
That skepticism has been fueled by the Russian president telling them to take Donald Trump's proposition seriously. And the US president isn't backing down.
We need Greenland, very importantly, for international security. We have to have Greenland. It's not a question of, do you think we can do without it? We can. If you look at Greenland right now, if you look at the waterways, you have Chinese and Russian ships all over the place.
This is not just history, it is destiny.
And the White House is now engaging in a charm offensive by posting an emotive ad online.
Security for the future. America stands with Greenland.
Very few people took his comments about this seriously. But the fact that the president is still talking about Greenland, that the vice president has been to a security base there, and that the Russian president is involving himself in the issue, takes this to a whole new level, to what can only be perceived as a genuine threat. The whole visit from start to finish lasted less than 3 hours. You don't break much ice in that space of time. David Blevins, Sky News in Washington.
The King has been seen in public for the first time since his short hospital visit after experiencing side effects from his cancer treatment. King Charles waved at well-wishers as he left Clarence House this morning. He's chosen not to share details of his illness, with some questioning whether the public deserve to know more about the health of the monarch. Our royal correspondent, Rhiannon Mills, reports.
His window was partly wound down as he left Clarence House. Even that says a lot about the King and his approach to his cancer treatment right now. He wants to be seen by people. He wants to be as open as possible, even now when the palace says he's had this bump in the road. After such a busy week of engagements, the announcement he was cancelling a trip to Birmingham came as a surprise. But it shows he is still under doctor's orders, and this time they decided it was too much.
Lovely.
Official duties and his public work, we're told, bring him great energy and joy. In fact, meeting others going through it has felt like a new priority. Leslie Woodridge, one of those he met on his first public visit to a cancer ward.
What he does or who he is, he's still a human being going through the same thing that a lot of people are going through. And it is, it is hard. So, no, it's really good what he carries on, and he does this because it makes us all realise that we're not alone.
The amount that he's shared has been a huge step change from the past, partly guided by him, but also past mistakes. In October 2021, the Sun newspaper revealed that Queen Elizabeth had actually spent a night in hospital, and that's why she'd cancelled a trip to Northern Ireland. The palace hadn't proactively told us, and it caused outrage. But with us still not knowing what type of cancer the king has, it hasn't stopped some asking if we still deserve to know more, a question for constitutional experts.
The king has a right to, the privacy of his health affairs, but there is a public interest when those health issues sort of affect the king's ability to conduct his engagements and fulfil his constitutional functions.
Your Majesty.
The significance of that constitutional role has certainly been on display in recent weeks, as he's found himself front and centre of high-stakes diplomatic issues. Last week, he asked other cancer patients in Northern Ireland how they were managing their side effects, before sharing a Winston Churchill phrase with a naughty word about keeping going. Largely with the king, we haven't really visibly seen any serious side effects. But with a state visit to Italy still planned in a week's time, this admission to hospital is a reminder that at times it has been tough. He's still very much going through it and living with it. Rhiannon Mills, Sky News.
A criminology student who asked his lecturers how to get away with murder and who was driven by hatred of the opposite sex has been jailed for at least 39 years. Nassan Sadi killed Amy Gray and attempted to stab Leanne Miles to death as the pair chatted by a bonfire on Bournemouth Beach last May. A judge said he had a rage against society and women in particular, as Amelia Harper reports.
Show us your hands. Slowly. Hands on your head! Walk down the stairs! Slowly!
This was the moment when a criminology student was caught for his horrific crimes.
Stop! Turn around!
4 days earlier, 21-year-old Nassan Sadi killed a woman and attempted to murder another on a Bournemouth beach. On this idyllic seafront, he killed 34-year-old personal trainer Amy Gray. He tried to do the same to her friend Leanne Miles, driven by his hatred for women.
It seems that you have felt humiliated and embarrassed by repeated rejections or perceived rejections of any advances you have made, particularly towards girls, which over time has resulted in a deeply suppressed rage directed towards society and women in particular.
Uncovering what drove him to murder was key. For his victims, they were in the wrong place at the wrong time.
I don't think Leanne and Amy were his intended target from the outset. They just happened to be in a situation that provided him with an opportunity. It was dark, there was nobody else around.
He was asked about this in his police interview.
There's lots of things here that indicate that you are the person responsible.
And I'm not responsible.
Okay.
And I have no reason to attack someone for no reason.
Sadi tried to claim it wasn't him.
I'm wrongly accused of mistaken identity.
Okay.
And mistakes can happen. And I'm just not responsible.
But the CCTV told a different story. Here, he's seen doing a recce of the area in the days leading up to his attacks. His trial heard that he was fascinated with knives, these just a few of them found at his parents' and aunts' homes. And as Sadi walked around planning his first attack, he was asking how. And his course was where he started.
Certainly there's ample evidence of him asking questions in his criminology lectures, to the point where his lecturer actually challenged him and suppose half-jokingly said, "You're not planning a murder, are you?"
Come out!
Nassan Sadi will now serve at least 39 years behind bars. A hatred of women so strong, the criminology student turned to the most serious of crimes. Amelia Harper, Sky News.
This week, Hamas authorities in Gaza published a list. It contained the names of 15,000 children. They say all of them died since the war with Israel began. On the first 27 pages, the ages of those killed are listed as 0. They never reached their first birthday. Our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, reports now on the children living, dancing and dying in the ruins.
The children of Gaza can't dream of growing up. War has robbed them of that. They dream instead of something else. Of a childhood, a chance to simply be children again.
I'm here hanging out with my friends because I just want to forget the war. I don't want to remember every day. I look at my destroyed home there and I think about the memories I had with my mum and dad in their room. And now it's gone. We used to have fun every day, sit in the kitchen, play together at home. Now it's all gone.
5-year-old Janine liked to dance, like so many 5-year-old girls around the world like to dance. She danced in the tent where her family were sheltering from the war nearby. She danced until the day that the war came home. It was early in the morning when the missile struck. The family were getting ready for suhoor, the Ramadan breakfast. 25 of Janine's relatives were killed, including her father and all of her brothers and sisters. Her mother was already dead. Janine now lies in a hospital bed and still unaware her family have been killed. She is mostly unconscious, her skull is fractured, she has bleeding on the brain and is in desperate need of surgery that she cannot get in Gaza. Janine, the little girl who danced amid the ruins, cannot dance anymore.
We hope to help her heal from the trauma and the loss of her mother, as well as the physical and mental exhaustion she is enduring. She has lost her home and with it any sense of safety. She's terrified of anyone who comes near her. We do our best to ease her pain, but she's carrying so much.
In Gaza City, another family that hasn't survived the night. Rescuers search for survivors, but expect more dead. And that is what they find. Bodies are pulled from the rubble, some of them clearly children. More young lives to add to the names of 15,000 children who have now been killed in Israel's war on Gaza. Samir, the only survivor, sobs in silent prayer next to the wrapped corpses of his parents and siblings. The small boy, surrounded by men, is now alone. Another orphan in Gaza. At the cemetery, the family are buried together in a shallow grave, parents and children side by side in death. Samir, the one who lived, watching on, silent and lost. A few days later, Samir returns to the ruins of his home. He searches for his toys and finds his school books. Scraps of life before the bomb hit and took away the protective shield of family.
I wasn't scared before because I had my family around me. Right now, I am scared. My mum and dad and everyone were martyred. I'm worried about losing more people. So now whenever I hear the planes above, I think they're going to bomb me and my home.
There is no word for someone who has lost so much. But in Gaza, there are so many who have lost everything. Their childhood, their families, their future. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News, in Jerusalem.
Israel has bombed Beirut for the first time since agreeing a ceasefire with Hezbollah in November. Its military says it targeted a drone storage facility in the southern suburbs of the Lebanese capital. The Israel Defense Forces issued an urgent warning for people to evacuate parts of Beirut shortly before the attack. The W.H. Smith name is disappearing from the high street after the sale of the 233-year-old chain to Hobbycraft in a £76 million deal. Its 480 stores are going to be rebranded as TG Jones. Stores in airports and train stations will remain the same. The leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage, has launched the party's local elections campaign, riding in on a JCB digger. The local elections are coming up on the 1st of May, and Sky News will be covering the campaigns of all the major parties. Mr Farage proposed a British version of Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency.
What we need in this country to pay for the cuts that people deserve and need, we need a British form of Doge, as Elon Musk has got in America. Let's have a British Doge. Let's do it. And we will scrap the net zero lunacy that is destroying manufacturing jobs in our country. It's madness.
Internal party challenges for the government is the topic of the day on electoral dysfunction, which has been published recently. Harriet Harman, a former deputy party leader, reveals how they'll be trying to keep the rebels in check.
They'll be reminding them that actually they really need to be supporting the government and think about the good things the government's doing. They'll remind them that when they got elected, before they got elected, when they got selected to be a Labour candidate, they had to sign a form saying they would vote with the whip. So they'd be saying, you promised you'd be voting with the whip. How can you be breaking that promise so soon in? So they'll be reminded that that's the kind of promise that they made and nobody forced them to be a Labour MP.
And you can scan the QR code on your screen right now to listen to that podcast with Beth, Harriet and Ruth. They are the children bearing the brunt of the housing crisis. And new data has shown that students living in temporary accommodation or insecure housing are more likely to fail their GCSEs. The Children's Commissioner is now warning that a generation raised in what she calls Dickensian housing risks being stuck in a poverty trap. Sky's social affairs correspondent Becky Johnson reports from a school in South London where the problem is particularly acute.
When the people came, they said that we had 3 weeks to move.
Like Alina, almost a quarter of the pupils at this school are homeless. She's spent her life being moved between different types of temporary accommodation.
We had to share like a kitchen, I think, with 2 people. And then I moved to a house in Dulwich that had a lot of cockroaches in it. And now I'm in my flat here. And it's also like, it has rats in it.
These children are bearing the brunt of the housing crisis.
I'm already trying to struggle with my own homework. Well, we don't have like a table, so sometimes we have to use like, we have to use the floor, or we have to use like a bed to sit on and then straighten our legs out to write.
They may be young, but new data reveals they're already on course to fail more GCSEs because of how many times they're forced to move. This shows the direct relationship between the number of times a child moves home and declining GCSE pass rates. Overall, around 65% of pupils pass 5 or more GCSEs, but that falls to 50% of children who've moved 3 times and just 1 in 10 pupils who've moved 10 times. Joanna's moved 7 times, meaning her chances of passing 5 GCSEs have already halved.
There was a time that I lived in North London and we had to take 2 trains and 2 buses, which was really far. So it was like 1 hour and 30 minutes away from school. So we had to wake up very early to get to school on time.
Each of these children spoke of shame and embarrassment.
My dad doesn't let me bring friends over, and I agree with him because I don't want my friends to see how I'm living.
The number of children in temporary accommodation has reached a record high, over 164,000. That's 1 in every 100 children in England. In inner cities, it's most acute. In Southwark, where this school is, it's 9 in every 100 children.
We need housing to be prioritised and sorted out, particularly for the inner city children that really, really are facing Dickensian situations. We've got to prioritise the children's education and stop moving them. Government needs to do better, and local authorities need to do better. It truly is a poverty trap if we can't do that.
The Homelessness Minister told Sky News the government is taking urgent action to fix the broken system, highlighting a £2 billion injection to deliver up to 18,000 new social and affordable homes. For schools like this, the challenge is helping children beat the odds to achieve a good education and escape the poverty they were born into. Becky Johnson, Sky News, Southwark.
The container ship that collided with an American oil tanker in the North Sea has now been safely moored in the port of Aberdeen. The badly damaged cargo ship Solong was towed into the Scottish port this morning. Earlier this month, the vessel crashed into the anchored tanker carrying jet fuel off the coast of East Yorkshire, causing a huge fire and leaving one crew member missing, assumed dead. The captain of the Solong has since been charged with gross negligence manslaughter. Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by political commentator Benedict Spence and columnist at the Daily Mirror, Susie Boniface. Amongst the stories we'll be discussing, the Daily Express leading on the devastating 7.7 magnitude earthquake in Myanmar and Thailand. We'll be right back with that. Do stay with us.
Sky News get the full story first.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah. The battlefield is outside the barricades. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent. It's really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
Welcome back. You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. More than 150 people killed and thousands injured in Southeast Asia after a powerful earthquake struck, with Myanmar's military junta appealing for urgent international help. US Vice President J.D. Vance and his wife are visiting a US base in Greenland in a controversial trip that comes as President Trump continues to insist that Washington should take control of the territory. The King has been seen in public for the first time since his short hospital visit after experiencing side effects from his cancer treatment. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with political commentator Benedict Spence and columnist at the Daily Mirror, Susie Boniface. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on those front pages for you now. Well, the Daily Express leads on the devastating 7.7 magnitude earthquake in Myanmar and Thailand, claiming the number of people killed could reach more than 10,000. Hell on Earth is the headline in the Daily Star. The Times features the harrowing image of the skyscraper which was under construction when it collapsed in Bangkok. But their lead story is about a couple who've been arrested for complaining about their children's school leadership on a WhatsApp group. The Daily Mail's front page says families are set to face a staggering £1,000 increase to their annual budgets from next week, as council tax, water and energy rates are all set to rise. The Eye leads with new gloomy polling, revealing that the Chancellor could be almost as unpopular as Liz Truss and her budget disaster. Meanwhile, the Financial Times features an interview with Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, who says it's childish to pick between Trump and Europe. The Canadian Prime Minister and former Governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, has been accused of plagiarising his University of Oxford thesis. He's been forced to deny allegations he copied 10 passages of text for his 1995 doctorate. That's in the Daily Telegraph. The Daily Mirror has an exclusive on TV star Paul O'Grady, who filmed a video just 20 minutes before he died, in which he thanks his fans for their support. The Sun splashes on Manchester City player Erling Haaland, who apparently gave the team's mascot whiplash. I'm not going to try to explain that last story, but we are joined tonight by Benedict Spence and Susie Boniface to take us through the newspapers. Welcome to you both. Starting with the Daily Express and this disaster in Myanmar and Southeast Asia, 7.7 magnitude quake, many feared dead, and the worst news perhaps to come still. Susie?
Yeah, because a lot of the footage and the pictures that we've seen so far are not from Myanmar. They're from the countries around it, because journalists can't get into Myanmar and aren't allowed to operate there. The junta that's in control of that place is the kind of government which is not great with dealing with its ethnic minorities, shall we say. And there's a lot of ethnic minorities in Myanmar. It's just a huge kind of melting pot. And in those kind of countries, and I've been in some of them in this part of the world, I covered the 2005 tsunami, and the same thing happened there almost. The first figures of how many dead there are always going to be exponential, and they're never really going to get to the true totals. In countries like Thailand and countries that are on the tourist trail, the numbers will be roughly right, because they're relatively good at counting people and then collecting the dead and sorting them out. In countries like Myanmar, the junta does not count in the first place some of the ethnic minorities, doesn't have much presence in the place where those minorities are dominant in the second place, and thirdly, when there is a disaster, really doesn't count them, really doesn't think they are worth collating and collecting information on and treating with respect after they've died. And so whatever figures that come out of Myanmar eventually, when journalists hopefully are able to get in there and see what has happened, and the junta has actually invited, finally, some neighbouring nations, military and so on, to come in and deliver some help, which they haven't done previously for cyclones and so on like that, as we were hearing earlier on. You may well find that those figures are just, they're a drop in the ocean of what's eventually going to happen because, again, Myanmar's not the kind of country where they've been building and preparing for this kind of thing, even though it's a very active area.
Benedict, are you comforted by the fact that the junta has asked for international help and something that they've not previously done, obviously realising maybe the scale of the potential disaster?
Well, that's the thing. I'm not comforted by it at all. I think if things are that bad, that they're actually prepared to ask the international community for help. I think that gives some semblance of quite how bad things could be, because regimes like that simply don't. As much as anything else, it delegitimizes them in the face of their own populations. They don't want to lose face with those people that they're having to sort of try to control, because that's a demonstration that they are weak. To move away from Myanmar, to look at places more like Thailand, for instance, you have the other effect, which is because it is very open and growing very rapidly. It's a key part of China's One Belt, One Road initiative. It's sort of on the trail between there and India. There has been a huge amount of very rapid expansion, lots of building in major cities. I mean, we've seen the footage from Bangkok, and we've all seen the footage, of course, of construction sites falling to pieces, of high-rises falling to pieces, because in some countries, like Japan, they have very strict codes about building high-rise buildings to make them, to a point, earthquake-proof, because they're aware of this sort of threat. In other countries where the growth is happening very rapidly and there are not those regulations in place, you will see a lot of destruction and a lot of people sadly losing their lives. A good example of this happening, of course, is in Turkey, where there have been lots of examples there of earthquakes hitting and buildings just collapsing, at the slightest sign of any sort of tremor. So on the one hand, you've got a place like Myanmar, which is sort of very tightly controlled by its government, and hasn't quite had the growth that perhaps it should do. And on the other hand, you have the sort of the boomtown economies, which are going to be suffering just as much because these urban areas, they attract a lot of people in, they work in very unsafe conditions as part of that massive construction push. And that is, of course, where a lot of the damage is going to be centred.
Also covered on the front page of the Star, if we can bring that up. But as you mentioned, with the construction perhaps not being up to regulation, or certainly not being earthquake-proof, it is very, very difficult to see how we can be optimistic about, what the death toll will be.
No, and like you said at the start, the fact that the junta has invited people into Myanmar would indicate that there is no great cause for optimism. And the other thing is that I think people have been kept out of Myanmar for so many years. I'm very fortunate to be in there for a day or so when I was covering the tsunami. And I spoke to people then who were not aware that the tsunami had happened in the country next door a week earlier and that it had killed so many thousands of people in their region. It is a beautiful, beautiful country with people in it who are kept in great ignorance about the outside world and about other things that are going on. So when people do start turning up to offer help, and what conditions they're going to be able to help in and the restrictions the junta's going to place on them in that help and how long they're going to put up with it before they say, no, it's time to leave now, and what impact that's going to have on the population that's there is very interesting, especially me, sort of perhaps even highlight sort of some further atrocities beyond those of the regime that we've already seen.
Lots of complex issues aside from the disaster. Let's move to some domestic politics now. The weekend. Reeve's plan for UK almost as unpopular as a Truss budget. I think last week, one of the papers mocked her up with the lettuce.
I saw pictures of some Americans being mocked up with the lettuce after the Signal Gate outrage, and I'd just like to claim slight ownership. I know the person who came up with the lettuce thing at the Daily Star, and I passed it on to him and said, look what you've done, it's gone worldwide. Yeah, so she's terribly unpopular, which is not surprising. She's had some big cuts, then that wasn't enough. She had to come back and make some more cuts, and I think that there's sort of an almost not quite a policy, but a suggestion within government. This is very much Rachel's thing, and we're going to come and stand over here while she does that thing there. And, if it all turns out for the best, then she'll look to be some kind of financial genius at the end of it. I suspect that there will be, when there's a reshuffle, they may find some other task for her because she will have become so contaminated almost politically by this period in government that if they do ever manage to achieve some growth and the positivity and stuff that they want before they go into the next election, she would be the weight that drags it back down. And so I suspect she's sort of keeping the seat warm for someone else.
Bendit, do you think her days are numbered?
Yeah, I don't think she'll see out the year, to be honest. I think she's Keir Starmer's flak jacket at this point. I mean, you know, it's a dreadful situation. Let's be very clear. As much as I don't think that she or Keir Starmer are doing a very good job, they did inherit a dreadful situation. It was never going to be plain sailing. It was always going to be an uphill battle. And I think that she should have known that, or almost certainly she would have known that she was going to bear the brunt of a lot of the ire. The polling, which is for the I paper, is curious because, as you say, a lot of people feel that they're going to be worse off. They're right about that. But they also feel that a lot of the individual policies are good things. So a majority of the people polled are actually in favour of the cuts to personal independence payments. 42% in favour, whereas 30% were against. People being polled are also very in favour of an increase in defence spending. So even though broadly they say, well, this is dreadful, I feel poor, if you sort of go through it individually, they go, well, I'm not necessarily opposed to that. And I also have to say, when your country and your economy are in a very bad situation, the popularity of a budget is not necessarily the measure of whether or not it's a good idea, because lots of people are going to be feeling worse off in this situation. That is what we've been told and come to understand for a very long time. So, as I say, good to know that overall everybody feels poorer, because they are. But when you sort of dive into the detail, you see maybe it's not so clear-cut as to how people feel about this.
Also on that trajectory, the Mail and headlines that the Chancellor will also not want to be reading, talking about Labour's tax raise and the soaring household bills. Families going to be £1,000 a year worse off. Susie?
Yeah, and, you know, to be fair, we had this kind of front page in the Mail under previous Conservative governments. They gave the Tories as much for kicking on the financial front as they are Labour, but you would be unsurprised perhaps to see them respond this way to a Labour budget. There's a couple of things that have happened this week in Westminster. So the first was what happened today, which is the Director of Communications. One of them has quit and has decided to leave. Says he's been there for 4 years, decided he's had enough and he's going. But it is kind of seen as like a mini, almost reshuffle behind the scenes of the Downing Street machinery, and that Keir Starmer's trying to change things after, you know, the way it's been handled in the first year. That's parked and done now. We're going to move on to something else. And they've also had a complete nightmare with the Hillsborough Law, which was supposed to be placed before Parliament within 2 weeks' time. And they let the families only see it, I think, so their campaigners see it last week, and it was absolutely disastrous and they refused to back it, and then they've had to scrap it and start again. And that's partly because, and it's the same reason that they've got this issue with the budget, which is you've got very inexperienced ministers in some cases who are green as grass, in some cases, not all of them, but who are taking advice from advisors and civil servants who are saying, well, you don't want to do this, and you don't want to do that, and that gives me too much work, and could we do this, actually? And, well, that's unworkable, we can't do that, Minister. And rather than ask questions or push it through, they're taking that advice. They're kind of being supine ministers. And so you're having this constant cack-handedness in government, which is part of the thing that the strategy and the communications has been seen to be so bad over the past, 10 months, 9 months. And that change is needed behind the scenes. But it also, I think what Keir Starmer needs to do is to have a change that voters can see, that can see him actually taking some charge of this. So with the Hillsborough Law, he made some phone calls. He's heard about it personally and said, right, we're doing this, doing that, scrap that, we'll change the other. And that's what needs to happen, I think, with Rachel Reeves, with some of the policies that have gone down so badly with people, the winter fuel payments, some of the PIP cuts and so on. You can have a reshuffle, exert some power, temper some of this, perhaps with incentives to recruit disabled rather than just punish them.
We've run out of time. But I think what you're suggesting is that perhaps he gets rid of his Chancellor. But
well, there's a few people he could get rid of.
Susie and Bendit, thank you very much for the moment. We are going to take a break coming up. Amongst the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of the Financial Times, as Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni says the idea of choosing between Trump and Europe is childish. Stay with us for more.
This is how you travel when the mafia wants to kill you.
He's almost given up his own freedom, but that's the price he's willing to pay.
Here, they don't just arrest 'Ndrangheta mafia members, they also live among them.
Time after time, I've seen the devastating impact of extreme weather and climate change.
We don't have much snow at the moment.
They've had a warm spring and exceptionally hot summer, and that means they're expecting to lose more than 3 times the amount of ice than they usually do.
Flames are still forcing people from their homes and leaving many questioning their futures.
Here was my life. We have nothing. I can't say anything, it's so sad.
This disaster is testing the resolve of everyone on this island.
The only way out now is by boat.
Everything you see is devastated, and the misery being felt by people living here is repeated in towns and villages across Central Europe. Sky News, get the full story first.
Turkey is burying its dead. The loss is profound.
Whole families died in this collapse, generations wiped out. The violence has penetrated the heart of the city rather than being contained to the estates around the edge, and that speaks to the level of anger being felt here.
In Sweden, police have seized a lethal stash. This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
This is an example of an advert, really. Anyone of any age could say, I'll do that for £1 million, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
Premier League Run-In is live on NBC and Peacock as City Pride is on the line with a pair of iconic derbies.
It doesn't get any better.
April 3rd, it's a London derby. Chelsea.
Beautiful goal from Chelsea.
Spurs.
What a game.
April 6th.
Brace yourself, Manchester, for the mother of all derbies.
United.
In the place.
City. The Premier League Run-In is live on NBC and streaming on Peacock.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, political commentator Benedict Spence and columnist at the Daily Mirror, Susie Boniface. Let's take a look at the Financial Times front page. And Giorgia Meloni, she's discussing the new relationship between the United States and Europe. And basically she's saying that it's childish to force a choice between the two.
Yes, this is part of a big interview that Meloni's done. I think it's the first interview that she's done with a non-Italian paper. She's become Prime Minister, first major one anyway.
Yes, it is.
And I think she's trying to set herself up here as an alternative to the mainstream opinion in Europe, which is that, NATO could be about to collapse and the transatlantic alliance is dead. She obviously has very close personal ties with Elon Musk. She says in this interview that she herself, as a Conservative, has some similarities in her worldview as Donald Trump being a Republican, and that actually it's not necessarily going to be all doom and gloom, and that it would be sort of quite foolish to sort of throw this up in the air. I think she says somewhere in this interview that some people are being a little bit too, I think it's political, yes, too political about Donald Trump, which is, it's a way of phrasing it.
European leaders.
The politicians. Yes, she didn't say Donald Trump is being too political with his tariffs or anything like that, but of course that's because presumably she doesn't want to get it in the neck when Donald Trump announces his next round of tariffs. I mean, It's interesting to see her sort of positioning herself as this sort of alternative stance within Europe, this alternative pole. She's been very critical on the subject of European defence, not at all on side with the idea of putting Italian troops in Ukraine as part of any peacekeeping force, for instance, even though she's been very hawkish on Vladimir Putin. But I think her close personal relationship, as I was talking about with Musk, and the sort of the ties that she has to parts of that sort of new MAGA right are interesting, because increasingly you're seeing, and we saw this with J.D. Vance in his Munich speech, once upon a time, the MAGA sort of perspective was very isolationist. Increasingly, it is becoming transatlantic. It sees Europe very much as its sphere of influence. As much as it's happy to cast Ukraine to the wind, it is taking a much greater interest in what happens in Europe. And I think to have allies like Meloni is obviously of very great importance. And, you know, you see, actually...
She was at the inauguration.
She was, and
she?
you see actually how...
Sort of leave it there. Much more in the 11 o'clock hour. Let's take a look at the weather for you now.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Our cool and changeable weather will be replaced by something warmer and more settled next week once high pressure builds. It's a chilly but mostly bright start to Saturday morning. A few showers will affect northern Scotland, while thicker cloud brings outbreaks of patchy rain and drizzle to Western Ireland. Thicker cloud, brisk winds and outbreaks of rain will spread across Ireland into Northern Ireland and Scotland through the morning, with some winteriness over the hills. Meanwhile, England and Wales will be largely fine, dry and sunny after that chilly start, with a better chance of seeing the partial solar eclipse. Cloud and patchy rain will push eastwards across England and Wales later on, but the skies will brighten in Scotland and Ireland. And don't forget, the clocks spring forward by 1 hour in the early hours of Sunday. The weather is set largely fine for Mother's Day.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Sky News get the full story first. Is this now all your